Hello friends, what's up? Welcome back to another coffee talk. My name is Kalyn and I like to host deep conversations over a cup of coffee that feel like hopefully you're hanging out with a friend. And today I want to talk about something that has really helped me this week, and it's been a bit of a groundbreaking perspective shift for me. And I feel like it could be helpful for other people out there that might be going through situations where either one, things aren't going according to plan, two, you're feeling very overwhelmed or very stressed out or worried about something in the imminent future or even farther out into the future, or three, that you are currently handling something that is not within your control, and that feeling of not being in control is making you feel powerless. There are going to be some questions that I might say or prompt into the conversation that would also make really good journal prompts. So if that happens to be the case, then I will let you know, and I will pop it on the screen as well if you're watching. It is a rainy, gloomy summer day today, so I've made myself a hot coffee. In fact, I made myself a vanilla almond milk hot creamy coffee, and I am very much in need of this little extra dose of caffeine today, especially as I myself am going into a planning session. So I am in a place where I've been feeling very disempowered and feeling like there's a lot going on outside of my control that's putting me in a position where I feel like I can't plan accordingly for the weeks ahead, which is super huge for me right now because I am literally in the final stretch of my pregnancy. I could give birth technically any day, and I feel very unsettled and not ready and unorganized. I definitely get a high from feeling very prepared, from feeling very ahead of things. And when I'm not in that state, it's really easy for me to lose my confidence. It's also really easy for me to get overwhelmed, and life happens. So for whatever reason, if you find yourself overwhelmed, out of control, or just stressed out or worrying, then I got you because I'm with you on that. A huge thank you to Shopify for sponsoring today's Coffee Talk podcast episode. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Go to shopify.com/KCTalk now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. That again is shopify.com/KCTalk, and that's how they know it was my show that sent you. So take a good snapshot of your situation. Really define what it is that you're feeling out of control with, or worried about, or out of sorts with, unsettled by. It could be anything as small as not knowing how to routine or structure your day, to something as big as not knowing or feeling comforted by the forecast of the future in the next 10 years. Like, it really could be anything. And that actually could be a prompt for writing as well. If you want to get really defined about what it is that's making you feel stressed out, overwhelmed, unsettled, I think it's actually a beneficial prompt. Or even if you don't want to write it out, to just even say it out loud or type it into your phone or say it to a friend. Like, really define what it is that's making you feel so unsettled and stressed and ungrounded in your body, disempowered in your life, because once you know the monster, it's easier to face the monster. When it's just this lingering feeling with no exact cause, or we haven't become conscious of the cause of what's making us feel so stressed out and overwhelmed and disempowered, then how can you tackle that? Once you are aware of what it is that is bothering you, you could do this in point form. You can make a list. You could collect all of the things bothering you. Again, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't list off every single thing that you could possibly worry about, but just the things that are affecting your life the most. The question that got asked to me that I'm now going to ask you is, what would be the worst case scenario? Write that down, say it out loud, figure it out, define that. Like, truly face it in your mind's eye for just a moment. And that's not to say that it's going to happen. And I think too, if you've dabbled into spirituality or into manifestation, or if you have ever even just had that lingering anxiety sometimes, that if we make space in our minds and our bodies for the possibility of a certain outcome, then we can almost reaffirm that it's going to happen. And so instead of even thinking about the worst case scenario, we just try to avoid it at all costs. The problem with this is that resistance actually creates persistence. So if you resist thinking or feeling or even embracing the idea of what reality could look like given the worst case scenario, then this feeling of unsettlement, this feeling of stress and disempowerment, it'll only continue to persist until you face it. And just thinking about it, just giving yourself the space and time to face it, to look at the monster and think, okay, worst case scenario, this would be the situation I find myself in. That does not mean you're going to manifest it because you've given energy or attention to it. Like, I get the whole where attention goes, energy flows, and like all of these preconceived notions that what we drive our focus towards, especially mentally and spiritually, we call forth, we magnetize in our lives. But the actual energy underneath what we're doing here by asking the worst case scenario is to give ourselves the tools and the ideas, the preparation that would be needed to have a plan if things go that way, which actually shifts us back into a more empowered state. And that more empowered state is much more likely to attract more empowering things. So giving yourself the time and the space to just think about what would be the worst thing that could happen isn't actually going to make the worst thing happen. What is the most unfavorable outcome given the context of what it is that's weighing on you? You know, the detriment of not doing this is that it leaves us, especially our mind, our mental energy, it leaves us running on this perpetual what if, what if, what if, what if. And it's a very practical thing to do. What I'm doing is I'm facing the beast of my mind, and that's just ravenous and feeding on all of my energy and sucking out my life force all day by just festering in this simmering worry and this simmering discontent, this simmering unsettledness that is leeching me of my power. And I'm turning and I'm facing that monster, the dog, the brain, whatever it is, and I'm actually giving it a bone. I'm saying, okay, let's actually play this out. What would be the worst case scenario? And that's going to stop my brain from spiraling into all of these what ifs and spiraling into all of these, oh my gosh, we haven't made a plan for that yet. Oh my gosh, like we won't know what to do if that happens. And basically taking me out of an anxious state. Case in point, okay, so yeah, let's say that does happen. Then what do you do? Again, a great prompt. So if this happens, if worst case scenario happens, what would you do? What will be your course of action then? These are very simple things. I'm not saying anything new to anybody here, and I'm not trying to claim like I am. This is just, again, one of those things that sometimes as a self-protection mechanism, we don't actually allow ourselves to go down this train of thought because we think, again, like I said, that we're either going to manifest it, one, or two. It's almost so daunting and overwhelming that we refuse to like pull up the blanket and take a look. And we just kind of keep it tucked in the corner, or we suppress it off to the side. But then again, like I said, it just sucks on your vital life energy all day long and all week long, or however long it's going to be until you actually face it. So by actually taking a look and by actually asking, what would I do if this actually was the outcome? You start to gain some of your power back because you come up with some creative concepts. Now, it is really hard to be creative when you're in a stressed out state. So if you don't get an answer right away, that's totally okay. You can say, okay, we've given the dog the bone. We've let the brain chew on the idea of the worst case scenario and chew on the worry. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go preoccupy ourselves with something else and allow creativity to flow again. However, hopefully, you can come up with some practical steps, even if it's just the first step or two. Now, this could work even if you wanted to get into a general, more empowered state in your life. Like, let's say you in general haven't been feeling super empowered by life, or have been stuck perhaps in a place where you feel really worrisome, really possibly anxious. Now, obviously not to the point that if you're actually suffering from things like anxiety, like these prompts and things can help. But I feel like it is obviously worth saying, or I feel like I hope it's worth saying, that if you suffer from anxiety or generalized anxiety to the point that it's actually a detriment to your life, then definitely explore multiple avenues, especially with people like your doctor or your therapist. But if you in general just feel like you've been worried about life not going the way you want it to, or there's not even a specific thing, you're just worried that life isn't going to turn out the way you want, then you can also do this for all of the aspects of life. Like you could list out, okay, what would be the worst case scenario if things keep going the way they do in terms of my relationships, in terms of my finances, in terms of my health, in terms of my friendships, my family, my living situation, whatever it is, my job. And as you do this, you have to evaluate the actual impact of what these worst case scenarios would be like, and then plan accordingly or think it through accordingly. This, again, can be hard if you struggle from, what's it called? There's a specific term for it where it's like catastrophic thinking. Like your worst case scenario goes far beyond what's actually possibly realistic. Not to say that when we are struggling with things like catastrophic thinking, which again, definitely would recommend therapy for. Sorry, I used to struggle from catastrophic thinking, especially when my anxiety was at an all-time high. So I know what that feeling is like. And sometimes it feels like you don't have control over the brain. It just kind of imagines like literally the most terrible things happening. And that can obviously feed into that anxiety and that disempowerment as well. But you want to be able to gauge some sense of realism. Like, realistically, the catastrophic thinking, the possibility of that happening is very, very small. I'm not saying it's impossible, but just that it's very, very small. It's more so that you don't want to spend this time, like this is advice. I don't want to give this advice and someone listening go off and literally get stuck in that thinking, get stuck in all of the most like absolute worst case scenarios that are very realistically not going to happen. So I guess my advice in that point, if you feel like your brain is kind of going there, is to do this with somebody, bounce it off somebody, like have someone in your corner that you can say, okay, my worst case scenario would be this. And then you can gauge it with somebody else that might be able to say like, man, come on, like that's not going to happen. And again, not somebody that's just going to fluff away your worry, but more so to say the likelihood of that happening is very, very low. What's more likely to happen from an outsider's perspective is this. Another thing that I would highly recommend too, I am currently reading The Power of Now, and a huge aspect in the knowledge of the book is how to separate ourselves from our thinking. Like when we over-identify with our thinking and we get our sense of self from our thinking, then it's really hard to separate our thoughts from reality. And our thoughts truly aren't reality. They're just, I mean, even just the brain itself is a really great tool for doing practical things like this, for following through on prompts, for coming up with plans and situations and preparing ourselves for scenarios that could possibly not happen. But the brain itself is not who you are. And the catastrophic thinking, if you can create some sense of space between you and the thought, the thinking itself, you'll realize that that isn't you. That anxiety, the worst case scenarios, again, aren't real. They're not going to happen just because, you have the worst luck or you're in a place where you're not feeling so great. So all that to say, if you can separate yourself from that a bit and come back to your power, even in the present, come back to none of this has happened yet. We're only playing through the worst case scenario so that we can prepare ourselves or put ourselves back into an activated, empowered state that allows us to feel like I've already thought that through. And now I can let it rest. Now I can let life flow. And now I can move knowing that if it happens, I have some kind of plan. A huge thank you to Shopify for sponsoring today's Coffee Talk podcast episode. As many of you might know, I actually use Shopify still currently for my storefront and my blog, and I've used it for many years. Shopify grew with me as I continued to grow and rebrand, and I still have my Shopify site waiting right now for when I'm ready to relaunch under whatever it is I do next. And that's my favorite thing about Shopify is it's so versatile, it's so easy to use. So if you have a talent, or if you create something, or even if you run a blog and you might eventually want to sell a mug or sell a sweater, then Shopify is the easiest place to do so. It's so user-friendly. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. So whether you're in the launch your online shop stage or the first real life store stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage, Shopify is there to help you grow. So whether you're selling scented soap or candles, or maybe you want to create your own books or your own Oracle reading decks, Shopify can help you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify's award-winning help is also there to help support you and your success every single step of the way. I can't tell you how many times I had to reach out to Shopify just to ask a question or to clarify something my accountant was looking for, and they always made it so easy. So sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/KCTalk, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/KCTalk now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. That again is shopify.com/KCTalk, and that's how they know it was my show that sent you. I'm going to use my personal example again because I feel like that's the best way for me to not speak so generically and to give you an example. So for me, it's okay, worst case scenario, if my kitchen is not done by the time, I mean, it would be nice to even have it sooner. I was planning on doing a bunch of freezer prep for meals. Not likely going to have the kitchen set up in time for me to be able to freezer prep what I was hoping to, which was like up to 3 months worth of food. I probably will not have time for that. I'm going to have to come up with a backup plan. So realistically, less favorable scenario, kitchen doesn't get done. Or my son, I have my new baby when daycare is closed. And so what am I going to do in that scenario? This is where I can start to look at my resources, look at my capabilities, and look at my other options. So hopefully you can do this from a place of you have it, but you won't need to use it. Like, it's just like a first aid kit. You have a first aid kit, hopefully in your house. You have a fire extinguisher, hopefully in your house, with the hopes that you also never have to use them. Even if the kitchen is done in time, will I freezer prep? Yes, I will try my best, but again, that's not in my control and I can't plan for that currently. So my next best option is to come up with some other way to bulk up on meals in my freezer so that I can still have easy, fast, pop it in the oven, set it, forget it kind of meals ready to go when I'm in the newborn phase and I'm healing myself, but I'm not going to be able to make them. Then you get detailed with that plan. Okay, so ideally, best case scenario, I have at least 6 weeks worth of meals. And then now I have to gauge the cost, because obviously it's more cost effective for me to make those meals myself, but it's not realistic given the circumstances that I'm in, the less favorable scenario that I'm in. So this is where I have to start to get creative. How can I creatively come up with a way to have freezer batched meals that I can't necessarily make myself, but that are also more cost effective? This is where creativity comes into play. And I'm planning an entire coffee talk that is solely just on the topic of being creative and taking creative control over your life. But a lot of it is also threaded through this conversation here, especially in this part of the worst case scenario plan, because this is where you gain creative control back. And when you are in a state of creation, when you are being creative, when you are coming up with solutions, that is you in your empowered state again. Even if you're coming up with creative solutions for a scenario that isn't something that you want. That was just one example, but take the situation for you, your worst case scenario, and think, okay, now let's look at our resources. Let's look at what we would do to buffer how much that could affect us. Let's buffer that worst case scenario and put ourselves or prepare for that version of ourselves in hopes that we never have to be that version of ourselves. So maybe my kitchen does get done in time and I actually do get a chance to freezer prep a bunch of meals. And so instead of having 6 weeks that I've already prepared for the worst case scenario by buying those meals or coming up with another way to get those meals, maybe I'll throw like a party and be like, hey, everyone come over. Well, I'm not going to be throwing a party in a house that's being renovated, but just as an example, maybe I'll throw some kind of like potluck party, but a frozen potluck party where you have to bring a freezer meal in order to come see the baby. And that puts an extra meal in the freezer that I didn't have to make, So that would make it so that then I have those 6 weeks of meals, regardless of whatever situation I find myself in. But now we can go into best case scenario. Best case scenario, my kitchen gets done in the next week or two, and I go full term, maybe even a little past full term. And suddenly I have a week to prepare a bunch of meals for my freezer. And instead of 6 weeks of meals, I end up with 8 to 12 weeks of meals. That would be the best case scenario. But because I've now prepped myself for the worst case scenario, and I've given myself some resources, and I've given myself some sense of feeling prepared for that, I can relax now into the flow of life's events, knowing that no matter what happens, I can be happy if the best case scenario happens, but if the less favorable scenario happens, I've already prepared for it. And now the stress, the disempowerment, it leaves. There's no more what ifs. There's no more, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I've already prepared for that. I've already come up with a backup plan. Some other examples of ways that this could incorporate into your day-to-day life would be, I think I actually spoke about this where someone was asking about the fear of marriage, and it was in a Q&A style video. But my answer to that was I suffer from a fear, or not really a fear of marriage. It's just one of those things that it would definitely be the worst case scenario for me if I ended up in a situation where I was divorced, because that nobody wants that. Obviously, anyone who gets married doesn't get married with the intention of divorce. So again, you can play this game or play this practical scenario, this practical tool out in any case scenario for your life. If you do, it's going to make you feel as though, and of course, you still can't prepare. You still, even emotionally, we don't know the emotions we're going to feel when we go through things until we're in them, right? But it's more so just to give yourself a sense of empowerment. I know I've said that word a lot today, but it really is. That's the key word here. Is it's to put you back into your power so that you feel capable of facing whatever life throws at you. For me, if it was the worst case scenario, I end up divorced from my fiance in the future, and that's not the life that I was hoping for, but it's like, okay, well, if that was the worst case scenario, how would I react to that situation? What would be my key priorities in those moments? And just asking yourself these questions, facing these shadows, facing these fears in a sense, and allowing yourself to move through them, knowing that, okay, how would I stay in my power? How would I tackle that if it really did happen? Let's go into finances. Let's say, okay, worst case scenario, what if I lose my job? Okay, well, do I have an emergency fund saved up? No, I don't. Yes, I do. If I do, how many months do I have saved up? And if it's a no, I don't, then how many months do I want to have saved up? So should I ever lose my job? Should I ever lose my financial security? What kind of backup plan do I have set for myself so that I don't throw myself to the wolves, or I don't throw myself into the sharks and I have nothing to sit on or to help me get by during a phase where either losing your job, or if you have a job like mine where your income can fluctuate quite a bit, when you're on the down months, when you're on months where I'm about to head into a maternity leave where I'm going to make significantly less money. I'm taking a break from my regular podcast schedule. And with those sponsorships, that is obviously going to significantly cut back my income. That was a choice that I've made. But with that choice that I've made it from a place of empowerment, because I was able to make a plan. I was able to come up with, okay, is there a way that, one, I could live with a little bit less? 2, can I save up before I take that break? 3, what are my basic bills and expenses? 4, do I have an emergency fund saved up, or just a little bit of extra money saved up for when I take a step back and watch my income decline just a little bit? Like, these are the scenarios that aren't always the most fun to think through, but they're the ones that are going to help you feel more empowered in the state of life that you're in. This whole concept, this whole thing has been such a game changer for me this week. As I've specifically, and it's actually a vlog that I'm filming, but as I'm specifically moving into solidifying my birth plan and feeling like I thought we were going to be in a different place by this point, it's like, okay, worst case scenario, what would, if my house still looks exactly the way it is? I could go into labor right now. I probably won't, based on the amount of stress that I'm feeling. But let's say I did. Like, is there any food in the freezer? Do we have enough newborn clothes and diapers? Do I have my upstairs? Do I have one room in the house that isn't under renovation, that is clean and can be my sanctuary and be my place of rest and healing? Do I have all of the things that I need for my postpartum care? These are the questions that I'm asking myself because it's putting me back into an empowered state instead of where I was before, which I'm talking truly, literally days ago, where I felt like I was in shambles. I felt like very chaotic. I felt like nothing is going exactly how I had pictured it. Nothing is going as planned. Everything's coming up so quickly. And I was getting so stuck in that overwhelmed state that it was just like, I felt almost like I was at a loss to whatever was going to happen. And I was just going to have to buckle up, grab the reins and ride life, ride whatever waves came my way and just deal. But that's not the case. In fact, there's more control that I can take over that situation if I'm able to breathe, calm down the anxious spiraling thoughts or the overwhelm in the body and think, okay, let's reassess the situation and let's come up with a plan. So that is my chat for the day. What would be your worst case scenario? And given that worst case scenario, what are you doing to prepare yourself for that? Not because it's going to happen, not because preparing for it means you're inviting it into your life, but because you want to get back into an empowered state that nothing could shake you, to an extent. I mean, everybody can be shaken up by many things in life, but to the extent of feeling like, you know what, I'm not worried because I've got a plan for that. I've got resources stocked for that. Let me know if you feel up to or open to sharing your worst case scenario, what's been bugging you and what's been on your mind, or if you've come up with some kind of plan for a worst case scenario that someone else out there might be facing too. Definitely feel free to share it in the comments. I know we're all facing all kinds of possible worry or stress or lack of control, especially in the state of life that the world seems to be in. There are a lot of out of control worst case scenarios. I mean, things like the cost of living crisis, things like, even the worry, the very, very real worry, like what if I don't find my life partner? Or what if I never figure out a purpose in my life? Like, what does it actually look like to face those questions and to put yourself in a place where you can look at things from a different perspective? All of us are facing all of these questions and these worries and these concerns on a day-to-day basis. A lot of us are struggling with the disempowerment of our biggest fears. And so if we can find a comfortable in our state of control, in our state of, healthy stress, if we can face these questions, face these fears, and come up with a solution or come up with some sense of preparedness, I really do think it does shift our energy, and it shifts it in a way that actually does the opposite. As I said, it doesn't actually end up attracting the worst case scenario. It puts you in a place where your feet are more firmly grounded. And as life happens around you, you're like the anchor deep in the sea. You know what? Actually, I want to add one more prompt into this. What would be the best case scenario too? Because if you're going to play one, you should play the other two. What would be your best case scenario so that you also know what that looks like, so that you can recognize it when good things start happening too, when things actually do go your way. And without further ado, sending you guys a cheers of my coffee, and I will chat with all of you guys in the next coffee talk. Bye, everyone.